Hey, my name is Joe Polyak, San Francisco Bay Area real estate agent and founder of Rise Homes. If you're thinking about buying or selling real estate, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I make videos like this if you're interested in learning more about the local San Francisco Bay Area real estate market and also just the communities. And I also answer questions, and we regularly do frequently asked question videos as well. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and comment with any questions or feedback you may have about the video.
Can you explain the probate process and how it affects real estate transactions?
The number one piece of advice I have for you, if you have any assets, if you have a home, if you have a lot of money in stocks, if you have any amount of assets, you should focus on putting together a trust, hiring an estate planning attorney, and getting your estate in order and making sure, usually they would recommend a trust, because when you pass away, in order for your family and your heirs to avoid going through probate, putting it in a trust kind of bypasses that. It gives clear instructions who will get what and what to do with your assets and things like that. You want to avoid probate when you can. Now, let's say that you or somebody who maybe your parents passed away or a loved one passed away or a close relative or something like that passed away, and you're going to be one of the heirs, you're one of the beneficiaries, and you may or may not even be the executor or administrator of the estate. You need to go to an estate planning attorney so they can file the petition for letters. So in California, you have to file, I believe if the amount is over $186,000 or something around there, then you have to file for a petition to get letters so that you can be the administrator or the executor of the estate, and that means that you can act on behalf of the estate. A very common example for us is that there's a home to sell. So your uncle, let's say, passed away, but he owned a home, he owned it under his own name, and maybe he did have a will. Maybe he put together a will like 15 years ago, and so that will leaves everything to you and your parent who was the uncle's sibling. Even though there's a will that says that you are to become the executor and you're to get the proceeds from his passing, get all of his assets, even with that being in place, you have to go through the process of probate. And so that's a court-regulated process where you have to now petition. So the estate planning attorney will put together the petition at the court for you to get your letters to be the administrator or the executor of the estate. And so that's a time-consuming process, and it is also not a very cheap process. You have to pay the attorney for their work and for everything they do. And I believe the required amount that you have to pay the attorney, I believe, is like somewhere around 2% of the total assets. Don't quote me on that. It may be negotiable, may change, is what you would be paying an attorney for helping you get approved for becoming the executor administrator of the probate. Hey, do you like this information so far? Don't forget to hit subscribe and hit the like button to help share this video with more people.
What specific challenges or complexities arise when dealing with probate and trust properties compared to traditional real estate transactions?
So generally speaking, it's pretty similar. Like if it's a pretty simple probate, like there's not a ton of feuding or fighting siblings or beneficiaries. If it's pretty clear cut, like there's just a couple of beneficiaries and there's one executor and everybody gets along, everybody's on the same page, then there's not a lot of issues. It's very similar to a regular sale. You just have to be careful to make sure you have the proper disclosure documents. We use in California, we'll use the exempt seller disclosure if you've never lived in the home, rather than using the regular questionnaires that are required for most other sales. So aside from that, and just knowing the timelines, like there's going to be a 15-day notice of proposed action, which can be waived if the attorney fills out the waiver for that in advance. So for the most part, it's very similar to a regular sale. It's just there's a couple of documents that you got to keep in mind, and a good realtor will work with a good attorney to just know what those timelines are and just make sure that they're following the steps required. Now, if there is a lot of disputes between, one of the beneficiaries and the rest of the family, something related to issues with a creditor or something along those lines, that could trigger a court confirmation hearing. And so that creates a lot of complications, because basically in a court confirmation hearing, if you write an offer on a property that's in probate and you get your offer accepted, and then there is a court confirmation hearing required, so then once that offer is accepted, they send that to the court to say, hey, we accepted an offer for $1 million. The court sets a follow-up court date for me as the realtor, the listing agent, for the attorney to come for any of the beneficiaries and anybody who wants to be present and anybody else who wants to bid on the home. And so there is a minimum overbid amount that's required by the court at that point, and then it turns into like an auction. The reason why this is set up, why I think this is set up, is probably, in order to make sure that there is a court monitored process to make sure that the home was sold without any kind of funny business. Because one of the beneficiaries might say, hey, my cousin who's the executor I don't trust them and I don't agree in selling the house and I don't think this is the right thing to do. And then so they dispute the sale, they dispute the probate process in general. It goes to this court confirmation hearing, and then having a judge present, having it be recorded in the court documents and the court history, that makes it a very like a legally binding situation, so to speak. What happens on a court confirmation hearing? Basically, what happens is that it turns into like an auction where if we accepted an offer, in our example, we accepted an offer for $1 million, the minimum court overbid amount would be something around $1,050,000. I believe it's 5% plus $500. So it'd be like around $1,050,000 is the minimum first offer that has to come in order for it for somebody to be able to now turn it into an auction and start bidding. Attorney will come up and say, okay, bidding starts at $1,050,000. If somebody says, okay, I bid that, then I believe it goes up in $1,000 or $2,000 or maybe $5,000 increments from there. And then the winner gets it at that point. And at that point, you have to have a 10% deposit cashier's check there. And I believe there has to be no contingencies in place, and it has to be an as-is sale from that point on. So if you are looking to buy a property that's going through a court confirmation hearing, you have to make sure you do your due diligence in advance before that court confirmation hearing to make sure that you're okay with everything related to the property, with all the disclosures, if there's any inspections, anything like that, and already have solid approval from your lender on that property as well, so that there are no contingencies in place from there.
It seems like a lot of unknowns to be ready for. So how does somebody do that?
Yeah, so there's not a ton of unknowns if it's one of the more straightforward situations. Like if there are maybe 3 siblings and a parent passed away and the parent said, hey, I want this sibling to be the executor or these 2 siblings to be co-executors. All the siblings get along and kind of understood, oh, hey, mom gave it to the oldest sibling to be the executor. Then it's really pretty straightforward and fine if everybody gets along. Now, if one sibling doesn't get along, then of course that throws a wrench in everything. So how do you prepare for that? Really, you just have to have a good attorney. And you just want to have a good estate planning attorney who can describe all the what-if situations that happen. Obviously, you just want to have a good realtor on your side. And also, you review the disclosure package, you tour the house multiple times, you review the comparable sales, and you learn, about everything about the property so that you're ready. So that, let's say in this example, the first offer that was accepted was $1 million, and then the first overbid amount is $1,050,000. And you might say to yourself, I'm willing to go up to 1.1 on this property based on the comps, based on the condition of the home, based on everything. Then in your head you're willing to go up to 1.1. So you might raise your hand at $1,050,000. Somebody bids you over $1,052,000. Then it goes $1,054,000, and then at $1,072,000. That's it. You come in, you say, okay, I'm at $1,074,000, and you win it because your max is 1.1.
But you have to have that cashier's check already ready?
For 10%. So you have to have a cashier's check ready for already 10%.
Now.
Has to be ready. So you should already have it with your max amount. They're not going to not accept it if it's over 10%, right, but they will not accept it if it's under.
Of course. How do you, who is a specialist in this area, maintain or initiate relationships with good estate planning attorneys?
Yeah, so it is obviously important to have good relationships with estate planning attorneys as a professional. The way that I personally am familiar with a lot of the different estate planning attorneys and different people who work in a different niche and different levels of different sizes of companies and businesses is just networking. Really, I just network. I go to the local bar association luncheons. I go to the Peninsula Estate Planning Council meetings, and I just stay connected with different estate planning attorneys through these venues, but also just other standard networking, like maybe inviting different local professionals to coffee or lunch and getting to know different professionals in that way.
What strategies do you employ to navigate family dynamics and potential disputes over inherited property?
So oftentimes there will be siblings that don't get along, right? And so for a number of reasons, and I'm not going to go into those, but one maybe example is, hey, one sibling spent a lot more time with their parent than the other siblings did. And then it turns out that another sibling became the executor because maybe the will was written 15 years ago when that sibling that spent the most time with the parent on their deathbed and through hospice and through the later stages of life, the will was written before all of that happened. And so now there's a little bit of frustration and jealousy and anger and all these other feelings, especially through a lifetime of being siblings and just kind of different things related to that. So my goal is I just need to remain professional. I really need to focus on selling the property and being professional and knowing what my role is in the process. And so my role in the process is making it as smooth and problem-free and well done of a sale as possible. And so that means I'm focusing on preparing the home for sale, getting it ready, painting, hiring contractors, working through that, having the correct disclosure documents available, etc. And sometimes, I'll have beneficiaries reach out to me on the side and say, wait, can you tell me what's going on? I want to, hear about this and what are you doing here? And then, somebody else is asking this and there starts being too many cooks in the kitchen. Generally speaking, how I deal with that is that at the end of the day, I am employed by my seller, my client is the executor or executors or administrators of the estate. And so that's who's hiring me, right? So that's who I am employed by. So sometimes there will be one administrator, executor, and there will be 3 beneficiaries, right? If it's a family dynamic where the administrator says, hey, I know I'm technically the one in charge, but everybody has the same rights as me to know, so you can keep everybody CC'd on the email updates and, everybody can be on the same calls, et cetera, et cetera. I want everybody to feel just as involved in the decision-making process, even though I am technically the administrator, and that's great. Sometimes it is, hey, I don't want anyone knowing anything. They're gonna get their money when this home is sold. You only are to communicate with me, and that's all that's gonna happen. And the attorney communicates that as well. And so in those kind of situations, I will, of course, listen to my client and do as they tell me. So a beneficiary might come and have a bad relationship with the executor and say, hey, I really wanna know, I don't know if you're doing things the right way. I wanna know about this. Can you send me this information? I say, unfortunately, I'm not able to communicate with you directly. I would say feel free to talk to the administrator or the executor about the situation, and they can give you the information that they feel is appropriate because they are technically my client and I work for them and I have a fiduciary obligation to work with them. Unfortunately, I cannot divulge any information without their approval.